Good afternoon, and welcome to another one of our Changemaker20. From when we first started until now, it's been quite a journey, and I just want to thank you guys for allowing us to be a part of your journey. I mean, we started when isolation just started to get going, and now we're looking like we're in the better part of it, to say the least. So thank you for bringing us into your living rooms, or if you guys are enjoying the warm weather today in your environment wherever you are. And so if we do have anyone that is catching us for the first time, this is a platform where we do get to chat with our subject matter experts in an open forum so that you guys can ask questions and chat with them below or chat with them directly. And so I'd love to make this a conversation. And so I know, Lynn, you've already, let us know where you are and how you're doing, but everyone else, just let us know, type in yes that you're here, or just let us know how you're enjoying your day today. Are you guys, in your living rooms? Are you guys enjoying the nice AC, or maybe in the balconies? But without further ado, do love to get started, introduce our guest for today. Today we have Karen Ward. Karen is passionate about unlocking the power and promise of curiosity in organizations and individuals so that they can grow and do good in the world. She is the founder of Curiosity Inc., a consultancy that helps teams strengthen their curiosity, creativity, and collaboration muscles, as well as Curiosity Global, an online community devoted to driving change through acts of curiosity, creativity, and connection. Prior to Curiosity in 2005, Karen did work as a strategist and insight specialist for a number of Fortune 500 clients and large advertising agencies in Canada and the US, helping them craft meaningful people-centered businesses and communication strategies. And so we are going to continue our session from last week, where we talked about curiosity and why it's crucial to the success of organizations moving forward, and really answering the question of what we find ourselves in without curiosity. And so really interesting lens that we get to look at this from. I mean, I remember a quote from last week: curiosity brings the dots and creativity connects them. I'm so sorry if I butchered that, but I really like the notion of it. But Karen, could you perhaps give us a recap of what we discussed last week?
Yeah, so last week we did talk about, I think from my perspective, both personally and professionally, that curiosity is the means by which we connect dots. And as Steve Jobs and many other people have talked about over the years, that creativity really is connecting those dots. But it's hard for us to create meaningfully from dots if we have a really narrow, small little group of them. So I'm a big advocate for curiosity as being a great gathering mechanism to bring a whole bunch of diverse stimulus and dots, if you will, into our lives and our work, and then using creativity and processes related to creativity to help make those connections. So it's my belief and also my experience that curiosity is the fuel that drives innovation. And we talked a lot about that last week, that without curiosity and questioning and a deep commitment to inquiry, it's very difficult to even get started on the path towards creativity and innovation. So I really think about creativity as a mindset, a skill set, muscles that we can strengthen and practice getting better at using over time, and a set of behaviors that really help us lean into the wicked, hairy, audacious challenges that we're faced with now more than ever. So it's exciting for me to talk about and encourage people to choose curiosity over certainty, choose curiosity over fear, because there is no certainty right now. And, there can be a lot of anxiety and fear. And I think curiosity as a mindset, skill set, behavior set can really invite us into a more easeful and innovative way through what's true for us right now.
I think being curious amidst all this has definitely helped. But maybe you can, I guess maybe you can explore why it makes sense to choose curiosity over certainty or curiosity over fear. Can you go a little bit more into that?
Yeah. So I think right now, certainty and fear, I think both invite us into stuckness instead of a sense of possibility. And I think that's always been true, but now, of course, given all of the uncertainty, there is no certainty right now. We don't know, there's all kinds of questions that we have that we don't know the answers to. So instead of staying in a certainty that doesn't exist any longer, or staying in a certainty that's no longer relevant, and I'm seeing, a lot of that shift happening in the clients that I'm working with, where what they really knew and believed to be true has been thrown up in the air or thrown out. And so they need curiosity to move towards maybe not certainty, but a new way of working and thinking about how to solve the problems that they're facing within the organization for their customers and clients. And with that, of course, that uncertainty and trying to figure things out comes a lot of anxiety and fear. And that's completely normal. I never ever recommend that people try and like push that down or push it aside. I really believe that as individuals and teams and organizations, we need to feel and acknowledge that anxiety and that fear to be able to move through it and come out the other side of it with a stronger sense of possibility. And I think curiosity can help us do that when we ask questions, when we stay in the questions long enough to move through the anxiety, the fear, the uncertainty. On the other side of that is an invitation into what's next that has more possibility baked into it than trying to hang on to what's no longer certain in pursuit of maintaining some kind of certainty. And it's hard work. There's no question about it. Yeah, it's not easy.
And so it sounds like certainty is also another way of being in comfort. You know, it provides us that comfort zone. And as we talked about last week as well, that's not where innovation or creativity can really blossom. And so maybe can you help separate or give us the line where we can separate curiosity, creativity, innovation with comfort and with a little bit of the, I know, good kind of anxiety, not maybe anxiety per se, but the kind of pressure that helps create innovation.
Yeah, I think there's one thing that I've been talking a lot about, and I've been going back and reading a lot of Brené Brown lately, because she talks a lot about, you know, you can choose comfort or you can choose courage. You can't have both at the same time. And I guess both at an intellectual and a practical level, I agree with that. I think what is true though, especially right now with so much uncertainty and so much concern and disruption from a health perspective around the world, and all that's, you know, related disruption unfolding from that, is that it's very difficult to be curious, creative, or innovative from a place of panic and anxiety. So I think this notion of like, you know, a leader saying like, we've got to get out of our comfort zone to, you know, innovate and pivot and create what's next. Here's what's true. None of us are in our comfort zone right now. So it feels almost insulting to say that to anybody, that we need to get out of our comfort zones. We are wildly outside of our comfort zones right now. And I do think actually that as individuals and as teams, we need to have some sense of security and safety to be able to create what's next, to be able to ask great questions that will lead us to, you know, great creative problem solving and innovation. So from a leadership perspective, I think that includes things like being really open and transparent with your team. You may not know all the answers, you may not have certainty, because none of us do, but you can be really honest and open and transparent about what's going on, because just the knowledge, that knowledge of knowing what's going on and not making up stories in our minds about what might be happening, settles our nervous system down and makes us feel more, a stronger sense of security and stability. And from that place, such as it is, I think we're better equipped to ask questions, create a problem solve, generate ideas, and innovate. But I think that's a big responsibility that leaders have, is it's not about creating comfort, because that feels very lean back and like, you know, settle into the couch nest and watch Netflix forever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what can you do to, you know, moderate the anxiety level, calm the nervous system of your team so that they can come to the work better able to ask great questions and create. Because it's hard to do that when you're trying to figure out the basic stuff around anything related to your work or life. And so I've seen great things, like the note that came out from the Canadian government recently that said to their employees, you're not working from home right now, you're trying to work in the midst of a global pandemic. And so, you know, we are not measuring our outcomes and our levels of productivity or efficiency by the same ruler we did before. And that's an amazing, now I don't know how much that's actually being lived, it's hard to say, but from a communication perspective, that was an amazing invitation to a sense of security and stability. It's like, if I'm not performing, or we're not performing as a team at pre-COVID levels, we are not at risk of being fired or punished or whatever, because the world is different now. So comfort zone, maybe not, but a sense of security and stability, I think, is really important if you're asking your team to do more with less, to be innovative, to ask great questions.
And so with that being said, then how does a leader start to create more culture centered around curiosity and then going about rewarding it and supporting it so that the culture can feel like it's safe to ask questions and it's prompted that they should be asking more questions?
I think the very best thing, there's two things leaders need to do. They need to model it, and they need to recognize and reward it. So in modeling it, I used to ask a question when I had a bigger team and we were doing a lot of innovation consulting work, and I was based in Toronto, when we were sort of midway through a project and I wasn't feeling great about where we were. Rather than saying I'm not feeling great about where we are, I would say, where do you guys think we are right now? Like, how far along the path to excellence are we? And the first couple times I asked that question, they answered it honestly, but then they understood that it was a veiled question. It was a question that was veiled in dissatisfaction. And that was really disingenuous of me as a leader. And I think, leaders asking questions that aren't freighted or, loaded, or they don't have context around them. Because sometimes when a question comes from a leader, it can put people on the defensive or make them feel like they haven't done the work up to expectations, which is what I used to do. Instead saying, I'm feeling like this, or we may not know the answer to this, but it feels like a good idea to ask the question to make sure as a group we're thinking about this, we're considering it. So, in asking, as a leader asking questions, make sure that you provided context, make sure that you're acknowledging your own vulnerability or your own inability to answer the question, and that's why you're asking it of the group, because that's great modeling. Like, if you as a leader can acknowledge that you don't know something, that you are wondering about something that you think the team needs to dig into, that's an invitation. That's great modeling, and it's an invitation into a curiosity-based conversation. And then, of course, the other piece is recognizing and rewarding curiosity, which I think you can, when people ask great questions, acknowledge that it's a great question, because that feels great if you're the asker, and it, sends a cue to the rest of the team that that's appreciated and recognized and rewarded. And then the other thing I would say is recognizing and rewarding that sometimes curiosity leads us down paths that don't immediately produce fruit, if you will, and that there is benefit in the exploration, as much benefit in the exploration as there is in the efficiency. And I think that that's sometimes what we get into conflict with in teams and organizations, that we choose efficiency over exploration. And often we need to put time limits on exploration because there are deadlines to meet, etc. But recognizing that an exploration was worthy because we learned from it, and we're going to apply those learnings back into our process. It's not wasted time, is really awesome way to both model and recognize curiosity in an organization.
I think you brought up a really good point earlier when you mentioned the questions that are asked. It's not just about can you ask more questions, but also how can you frame that question so that people receive it well without becoming defensive. Because one, I do think people should ask more questions, and it's something that I think is becoming a lot more normalized. But can you go a little bit more into asking the right questions? Can you go into more, what is a loaded question, and how do we, refrain from making, or giving off a little bit of that kind of defensiveness from people?
I love that. Great question, Daniel. I love that question. So I think this is a very blunt distinction, but I find it really helpful. I think there are questions that invite clarity and questions that invite exploration, discovery, and creativity. And I think it's really important to be clear, both as a leader and as a participant or a team member, on what kinds of questions you're asking and when. So at the beginning of a project or a process, I think actually, you know what? Both questions are really useful. It's really useful to ask clarifying questions so you get clear on what you know or what you don't know. And those tend to be more closed-ended questions that can be answered with a yes or no, with a yes or a no, or with like specific data, facts, or information. Questions that invite exploration, discovery, inquiry, staying in the question, are the open-ended ones. And I think because we do crave certainty as humans, we can't help it. We really do feel more comfortable with certainty or solid, specific answers. Open-ended questions can feel really uncomfortable. But I think especially at the beginning of a process, where you're trying to figure out what the problem is or what the key question that you need to be using to drive the work or drive the project forward. Asking those open-ended questions are really critical. And the way you can avoid loading them or making them freighted is asking an open-ended question that bakes the answer into the question. For example, like, what are all the ways we might put painted lines on the sidewalk to avoid? It's like you've baked the answer or the solution into the question you're asking. So it's not a really open, it's very loaded, it's very freighted, because you're asserting your solution in the question. And it's very hard not to do that sometimes. So really being conscious of when you need open-ended questions that invite divergent thinking, and when convergent questions, or ones that invite yes or no or clarity, specific data, is really important. And by the way, I think you need both kinds of questions throughout a creative or an innovation process, always.
Mm-hmm. And now going into the actual question itself, I mean, last week you mentioned that there's a session that you were having as you were exploring insight into these questions, and a person felt that they weren't being productive, but you clarified it's that, no, it's not that we're not being productive, it's just you're exploring the question a little bit longer than just the answer that you immediately get. And so can you go into a little bit of what that means to stay in the question?
Yeah, I love this notion of staying in the question. It's so uncomfortable for so many of us, because we are trained, we are rewarded, we are recognized as grown-ups for knowing answers, not asking questions. So it's so embedded into us culturally, and I even think biologically, to reach quickly for the answers and then move on. For me, staying in the question is making sure we're asking enough questions and enough kinds of questions, different kinds of questions, especially at the beginning, so that we are certain we're solving the right problem. I think it was Albert Einstein that said, or maybe Linus Pauling, I can't remember which one, who said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend like 59 minutes figuring out what the problem was, and a minute spending, coming up with solutions, because it's so easy for us to solve the wrong problem or start solving the wrong problem, because we're making all kinds of assumptions about what the problem is. So staying in the question long enough that we can explore things from different perspectives, different angles, come at it from, really examine what the issues are from a whole range of perspectives, helps us zoom in on the right problem. And the right problem is really the one that we think we have the ability to make the most impact on, that might benefit the business best, might serve the employee group, whatever it is that you're working on. Make sure you're solving the right one. So staying in the question long enough to do that. And then I think you also need to stay in the question, or stay in curiosity throughout your process. Like, if innovation or creativity goes from like clarifying the problem to generating ideas on how you might solve that problem to developing some of the solutions, that development mode, you're still asking questions. It's like, well, will this work? How might we change it to make it work better? And then even when you get into implementation, and you see this with software companies that launch multiple versions of things, and they're not the only ones now, even after implementation, they're still asking questions about how are the users engaging with the interface? Are they getting confused by the way that these two pieces work together? They continue to stay in curiosity so they can refine that product, that service, that experience to meet needs in a deeper, better, more relevant way. So curiosity doesn't, even though I think it is the foundation and it's the fuel, it kind of kicks things off, you need it throughout to make sure that you're serving and supporting your customers or whoever your stakeholder groups are the very best way that you can.
Karen, I have so much more questions I do want to ask you, and I'm sure there's so many others that people want to ask you as well, people that are tuning in, like, why is your bookcase color coordinated?
I'm gonna write a book about that. Yeah, there are good reasons.
Yeah, it's just so eye appealing. I mean, I can't stop looking at it. So it's great. But unfortunately, that is all the time that we do have for today. I mean, we always say 20 minutes just goes by. I think this was one of the fastest 20 minutes that we've had. It was a great conversation. I feel like I learned a lot. And so thank you for sharing with us. And thank you for everyone who tuned in today, as this is all the time that we have. But if you guys do want more of Karen, because you can't get enough of her, like I can, definitely let us know if you want to book her for a custom virtual event or for her services. Just shoot me an email, and I'd love to help get you connected. And we will also be continuing our virtual speaker series tomorrow with another sense-making conversation with Andrea and Lisa Taylor. We will be exploring career ownership in chaotic times. As a majority experience career disruption, we want to tackle some of the questions like, are we able to take ownership, and how can we navigate through upheaval and change? Maybe some are destined to find equilibrium, while others remain off kilter for months and years to come. So I think this is a very much needed conversation, and I'm really looking forward to it. So Karen, once again, thank you. I hope this isn't the
My
last time
pleasure.
we get to have you on our platform. It's a great conversation. And for everyone else at home, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay connected. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.